I'm joined today by Arne Kalleberg. He is professor of sociology at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, also the author of Good Jobs, Bad Jobs. It's really great to have you here. You know, we've been talking quite a bit about the latest jobs numbers, and really we've been talking about jobs for years, 4 years, 8 years, who knows? Jobs are always an important issue. So I think a good place to start is when we hear about a new jobs report, as we get monthly, what are the most important things to consider in trying to evaluate whether it is a positive or negative report?
Okay. Well, first of all, is the sheer number, and that's generally what people look at first. But that tells only part of the story. You also look at the unemployment rate, but again, that's affected by whether or not people are actually looking for jobs. So what I like to look at is not only the number of jobs, but the types of jobs that are being created. Are the types of jobs being created in the public sector or the private sector? Are they jobs that pay good wages or bad wages? And importantly, whether or not these jobs are full-time or part-time. These are all important clues to how our economy is recovering. Because while in one sense, a job is a job is a job, in another sense, we've been creating a lot of low-wage, part-time jobs that while they count as a job, they don't really help the workers very much.
So let's explore that a little bit. When we look at this divide or the proportion of full-time to part-time jobs, how does the job creation that we're seeing over the recent years compare in terms of the proportion of full-time to part-time jobs to job creation periods in past times?
Well, what we have now is an unusually high number of what we might call involuntary part-time jobs. These are jobs that people are taking for economic reasons, though they would prefer full-time work. There are two reasons for why a person might take an involuntary part-time job. One is because of a decline in demand in that industry. A second reason is that they would like a full-time job but simply cannot find it because it's not made available to them. And that latter category is what is unusually high. And hopefully it will come down as the labor market gains steam, but that is higher than it has been for a long time.
So let's explore that a little bit, because you mentioned the two possibilities, right? And the demand side of it, and then they would like a full-time job, but one isn't available. When I talk to economists that sometimes are progressive, sometimes are conservative, etc., there often seems to be a disconnect between the role, number one, of course, of tax rates on job creation. But number two, there often is a disconnect when people think about the types of jobs that are being made available and what types of economic changes could be put in place that would create more full-time jobs. And I would open this up to you. I'll kind of make it an open question. I never hear mentioned when I talk to conservative economists that if simply we had more money in the hands of those with a higher marginal propensity to consume, that is the poor, the lower middle class, and the middle class, if they had more money, they would likely spend most of that money, and that would stimulate job creation via demand. A lot of these individuals focus on supply side, and I feel that there's not enough attention paid to the importance of demand side stimulus.
Absolutely. And as a sociologist, I tend to look at things a little bit differently. I tend to look at the demand side, and I tend to look at the role of employers and state policy in the job situation. Now, the kind of things you mentioned in terms of providing more money in the hands of consumers, which will stimulate demand, that's exactly what a strong argument is for increasing the minimum wage. And it seems to me that if we are able to increase the minimum wage, there is very little evidence that it's going to result in major job loss or unemployment. It will stimulate demand. Now, that by itself may help to reduce the part-time employment, but not by itself, because there are other incentives that employers have for creating part-time jobs. one of which is a sort of a perverse incentive from Obamacare, which is that companies don't have to provide benefits for people who work less than 30 hours a week. And so there's an incentive for employers to provide less hours. There's also the truth that in America, employers are allowed to discriminate against workers based on whether or not the job is part-time or full-time. This is the last vestige, perhaps, of legal discrimination. But if you have a part-time worker, you are allowed to pay that person less per hour than if the person was full-time. So there are these additional incentives that are economic in base to provide employers with an incentive to not create full-time jobs.
I find it unfortunate that when I have that conversation with many right-wingers, their solution, and I use the term solution incredibly loosely, and you'll see why in a second, their solution is, of course, that there should be absolutely no mandate to provide health insurance to full-time employees, so on and so forth. And I find it very difficult with individuals who are predisposed to that type of thinking to shift the focus to what I think is obvious if you look at every other country at our level of development, which is let's disconnect employment from health insurance and let's take away the for-profit incentive for health insurance. But I feel like that's almost a lost cause with individuals who just feel that they just shouldn't have to provide any benefits, full stop.
Yeah, well, I agree with you 120%. Unfortunately, we have a system in America in which we have employer-provided welfare benefits, which is a accident. It's not an accident, but it was something that developed after World War II, and so we never got the single-payer kind of government-sponsored health system that most other countries have. That would have been much preferable. Given where we are, however, we've got alternative ways of delivering healthcare, and it's incredibly important to try to separate healthcare provision from employment, because one of the characteristics of the recent last couple of decades is that there's a great deal of insecurity, which I call precarity, in the labor force, and people losing their jobs. And a major consequence of that is they lose their health insurance. And so if whatever we can do to provide people with a cushion, that would not only help individuals and their families, but it would also help economic development, as people would be able to start up businesses on their own and so on.
Oh, no question about it. And as a sociologist, I'm sure that you're also interested in something we've discussed, which is if someone is required or needs to stay at a job merely for fear of losing their health insurance if they leave, that doesn't lead to job satisfaction, which, as we know, negatively affects productivity. And further, as a general thing, when people have the ability to kind of be self-realized and self-actualized, not making decisions based merely on the fear of losing health insurance, it's better for everybody. It's better for small businesses. It's better for large businesses. It's really a great economic stimulus for people to be able to work in the field in which they want to work.
Absolutely. I mean, coercion is not a very effective way of defining employment relationships. Employers increasingly depend on the consent and the enthusiasm of workers, especially in our service economy, where employer and customer relations become so important. It's very important for people to like what they do and to be enthusiastic. That helps them, it helps their families, but it also helps the company to succeed. And we do that by providing the conditions that would increase job satisfaction.
We've been speaking with Arne Kalleberg. He is professor of sociology at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and author of Good Jobs, Bad Jobs. Really a pleasure having you on. Thank you.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much.